Liverpool Street Station toilets are the first public toilets I think I ever pooed in. There you go. There's your intro, Smith.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off-Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Jesus. Hello. Hello. Welcome back to Off Radar. I'm James Smith, and in my ears and eyes are James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Nothing. Yeah, I guess it's
sensitive
more of a
subject
sensitive
matter.
Yeah, you can't really.
Well, I could have gone like hello and done like a Halloween thing, because is this a Halloween podcast?
That's a good starting point. Yes, this is one of our Halloween podcasts. So yeah, it follows, and then next week The Crow will come out. So yeah.
Eatock's just booing you. I don't know whether.
No, you missed it. I had BS to the end, so it was boobs. See.
Okay.
I made it nice.
Yeah, fine. But yeah, every year we do a couple of Halloween-y type episodes. I'm trying to think of them all now off the top of my head.
I was going to say, have we?
Yeah, we did.
Was Near Dark Halloween?
Near Dark was Halloween last year. We did The Thing, which wasn't Halloween, but it was still kind of related. We did The Fly. We've done From Dusk Till Dawn, They Live. Anyway, we've done quite a few horror movies, and I think a few of those. What's the Korean one? Train to Busan. A few of those have kind of fallen into our Halloween specials. So.
We did Mr. Nobody. That was pretty much a horror film.
That was.
Wimbledon as well, don't forget.
Wimbledon. How could I ever forget? The One, as in the one.
But yeah, this week we're doing It Follows, which came out in 2014. It's kind of one. It's a weird one. It was kind of one I just picked because I'd never seen it. So straight up, never seen it, and I was intrigued because a lot of people seem to talk about it. When
I'd never even heard of it. When you said It Follows, I was like, right, okay, I guess this must be
to It.
Yeah,
I thought, it must be a new film. So I go and look, I need to find out where this film is showing, and it was on the marvelous service called Plex, which only shows like 400 adverts a minute, and I was like 2014, 10 years ago.
Oh, okay, so you never heard of that? That's
I'd never heard of this film.
Yeah,
I can't say I even know anybody in it.
No, well, I guess that's the point, isn't there? Maybe we'll get there in a sec. But Nige, had you seen this one?
I had, yeah. I saw it. I don't know if it was 10 years ago. I don't think it was too long after it came out. There was a little bit of. I can't remember if it was a word by mouth recommendation or whether I just saw it on IMDb or what. But yeah, I was intrigued to watch it. And every year, so for Halloween, well, I say every year, most years for Halloween, Helen and I will have like a week of watching spooky movies. And normally I pick them and she just hates it because she doesn't particularly like scary movies. And I'm
with Helen on that one. I can't. Yeah. I ain't got no time for scary movies.
Well, I've kind of hurt myself because it's like in the sense of we don't watch horror films any other time of the year anymore because she's like, same for Halloween. And when Halloween comes, she's like, I don't want to watch any scary films. And it's like, So I've got like a whole list of these films that eventually I want to watch. And I think this was on there. And yeah, lo and behold, we watched it together many years ago.
And I think you're right. It is one that's kind of picked up traction over the years. It's almost like a word by mouth. People have it's kind of grown out of nowhere, this film.
I think it slowly has been walking after all of us, Smith. I think that's what it does.
See what Nige's done there. What Nige's done there has taken the premise of the film and brought it into his actual sentence.
That's true. I always wonder why there's 5 people on this podcast. It's 2 James Etox, 1 Nige, 1 Smith.
5?
And then there's the other, the follower.
Oh, we did the others.
The one stood right behind you, Smith.
No, we did do the others. I feel like It Follows is about our one listener to this podcast that just keeps following us.
It's bringing harsh reality there.
Yeah,
and that one listener is me.
Oh God, that's even worse.
That is even worse.
Wow.
And the film was directed and written. I guess this was his breakout film as well, by David Robert Mitchell. I had to check that it wasn't David Mitchell.
I did as well. I saw the name after I'd seen the film. I went into Wikipedia and I was like, "Is it?" And I was like, oh goodness, no! It didn't seem his kind of shtick, to be honest.
It didn't, but Richard Ayoade's done a couple of features that you wouldn't expect to be.
No, that's true.
There's another David Mitchell, isn't there? The author. I know, David Mitchell from Peep Show has also written books, but there's a more well-known author called David Mitchell. So it's clearly a common name for creatives, apparently.
Oh, okay.
David Mitchell.
And like you said, it hasn't really got, at the time, a set of unknown cast, and obviously a very low budget film. So, yeah, starring Maika, Monroe, Keir, Gilchrist, Oliver Luccardi, Lil Sepe, Daniel Zavato, and Jake Weary. And I probably couldn't tell you who they play.
I like the way, you sounded like you said Little Sepe. Oh, Little Sepe was part of the cast.
Little Wayne, yeah.
Little Beppe.
Lily.
Yeah.
Little Beppe, EastEnders.
Lily Sepe. Little Pepe. Shut up. And I asked who? Nige. No, Etox.
No way.
You did a synopsis. What's this film about?
Okay. Here we go.
Straight in. I'm opening Pepsi for this.
Here we go. This is Gordon Smith.
No Pepsi for me either. I'm afraid.
Cue me in with your Pepsi. Cue me in.
You'll be flagging by.
There we go.
There you go. Go on.
Young and innocent Jay Height goes to a movie with her relatively new boyfriend Hugh. Sometime later, Jay and Hugh have sex for the first time, after which Hugh uses chloroform to render her unconscious. Jay wakes up to find herself in an abandoned building tied to a wheelchair. Hugh informs his captive that he has purposely passed on a curse to her. The curse involves a random figure slowly walking towards her in any place at any time, intent on killing her. Hugh explains to Jay that for her to rid herself of that curse, she must not only sleep with someone to pass it on, but also inform that person after the event. For if that person is killed, the curse will return back to her. Jay and her friends drive to a location, at which point Jay sees the figure approaching. Then Jay and her friends drive to a different location, at which point Jay sees the figure approaching. And then Jay and her friends drive to another location, at which point Jay sees the figure approaching. But then, wait for it, Jay and her friends drive to another location, at which point Jay sees the figure approaching. And finally, the unexpected twist, Jay and her friends drive to a location, at which point Jay sees the figure approaching.
So this is a film about driving, is what you're saying?
It's a film with a plot that goes absolutely fucking nowhere.
I used to daydream about being old enough to go on dates. I had this image of myself holding hands with a really cute guy, driving along some pretty road. It's never about going anywhere, really. It's having some sort of freedom, I guess.
Jay, you awake? You're not going to believe me, and I need you to remember what I'm saying. This thing, it's going to follow you. Somebody gave it to me, and I passed it to you.
The film starts with we're in this kind of suburban world, and we see this girl in white running terrified out in the street. And I think for me the first obvious thing is
she's terrified of the cameraman, isn't she? That's what it is.
Yeah, she is. She's absolutely terrified because he keeps following her around.
Sorry.
But is this kind of suburban world that they're in doesn't feel like we get in quite a lot of other Hollywood films. It's always quite nice. I remember even in Get Out, it was quite, not a bad like looking neighborhood, and even in horror films in general, they try and set it up in a way where it looks quite affluent. Whereas in this, it's definitely not. So it's autumn and it's dark and dreary, and I think that was quite an interesting take on the setting. It's so far removed from Tim Burton, for example, as possible to make that kind of realism. Right at the start.
Interesting. Sorry, just to jump in on that point, like for me, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Halloween and kind of the setting for that. But you're right, probably Halloween's a little bit more affluent thinking about it, but it just kind of had that kind of suburban feel, albeit slightly more rundown suburban feel.
Yeah, and the music straight from the off as well.
Music's very striking.
It's striking. I mean, I thought it was great, the music, but quite 80s, 90s, lots of synth. Like it was quite hard. I don't know if you guys felt this. It's quite hard to place when this film was set.
Yeah, I mean, like when we see that scene with her and her friend. Oh, sorry. When we see the scene with Jay and her friends in the house, a sister and her two friends, Paul and the other girl with the glasses, whose name I forget. Her friend, they're watching like an old TV.
Yeah.
The cars outside go between old cars, classic
like
cars,
60s, yeah,
but also like modern cars. And the girl is looking almost like, she's looking at her compact mirror, but using it as like a phone, like looking at text messages.
So this was done intentionally. Like the director wanted to do it basically so it was kept as an undefined era, so it more resembles like a dream. Like some of the cars, as you said, are from recent times. Some of them are from the sort of late 60s to 80s. Basically, every time they're watching TV, it's an old school CRT. Yeah. There's like Yara on her device that looks like the Shell Compact, but she uses it like an ebook reader and a light source. It's almost like a all in one. And then at the very beginning, the girl uses like a standard cell phone, drives a modern automobile, and there's loads of normal cars kind of thing. So it's I think it was an intentional decision to do that and kind of to just add that sort of layer of mystery, I suppose. And again, I think for our generation at least, a lot of like the sort of classic horror films are kind of from that kind of era where it was like the 70s, 80s, where the idea that I guess technology nowadays shuts so many doors to horror films. It's like, just use your phone or do this.
That was always,
So, because I remember like watching Blair Witch and it's like, well, they can't get reception, so they're screwed. And it was like, in the old days, they didn't have mobiles. No. So anyway.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a throwback in a way to like an old school horror movie that, like you said, Halloween was like quite a good influence, but like Nightmare on Elm Street, even like Final Destination to a certain degree with the whole kind of like thing you said about where it gets passed on, that kind of you can't cheat death type thing. So like the influence is kind of coming through in this very low budget. I imagine it feels low budget, probably
it's a very independent movie.
Definitely, it's like $1 million. But sort of going back to the influences kind of you mentioned there, so I agree, like there's definitely a huge like John Carpenter influence, and I think the director sort of called him out specifically, George A. Romero. But I would also say in kind of like the late 90s, early noughties, there was a string of quite well-known Japanese horror films like The Ring and things like that were of a very similar ilk. Like there's one where videotape was kind of passed around and then a child would come out the TV and kind of murder you and things like that. I feel like it's a combination of like bringing that kind of the Japanese horror film genre together with like a more classical like Halloween, like Jason Lives, like Friday the 13th is the prime example of the bad guy who walks really slowly but always seems to catch up with the stupid teenagers. And this is kind of the dynamic there. You've got basically promiscuous, relatively stupid teenagers having fun, and then you've got the bad guy who can appear as like any person or any person, any sort of size, any sex, and just can only be seen, similar to kind of like Freddy Krueger, I suppose, in some regards, only seen by the person that it's chasing, or the person who's had the disease or whatever it is, which feels like kind of a play on like almost like the AIDS crisis.
I feel like that's I don't know, like I kind of got the impression that if this movie I feel like I haven't seen any kind of documentary or reviews of this, but I feel like people are going to try and place that on it and say this is clearly a reference to the HIV and AIDS. It's like doesn't quite work in the same way, because the disease here is purposefully spread. You know what I mean? And that was the problem about the thing. I don't want to get into this already, but it's quite a vague curse in that it's clearly defined, but it's like, but at some point wherever this curse began, it's always going to end. Therefore, it never begins. I don't know. It just. I understood, like you guys are saying, it's definitely feels like a throwback in places, but I think also it doesn't really understand its own rules well enough. Yeah, but yeah.
I think on that kind of, like I guess the message of the film, like the things I got from it was that kind of the idea of not being believed, like young women not being believed. And I know what you mean. There are like kind of things in this rule because obviously, to sleep with someone, you have to sleep with a man. But, like there is this kind of heavy emphasis on the sexualization of young women in this film. And I think that's kind of like magnituded by the fact that the whole of our main cast are young adults, teenagers, rather than, like there are adults in the film, but they're only in the film as moments of authority, or like a parent is barely in the house.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is confusing, isn't it? But it's almost like what's the guy who did Kids? It almost feels like like that kind of look into this generation, but we're not really going to break out of it. And even some of the things that follow, and I know it's all to do with the mind, quite a lot of them are older people, which was quite an interesting take. I'm not quite sure of the messaging behind that, but anyway.
Well, there's a little bit. So, like the first time when she has sex with, is it Jay? The name of it? No,
Jay is the girl.
Hugh, sorry, yeah.
Who's Jeff?
Jeff, where's Jeff?
Pete
has sex with Hugh. He takes her obviously to that like abandoned car park or whatever it is. Yeah. And you see a woman walking towards the camera. That woman is actually his mum, who we kind of meet later on.
Oh, right, okay.
And there's like the climactic scene. It takes the shape of like her father as well, her dead father, which is why she sort of, when they're saying, "Oh, what does he look like?" she doesn't say to her sister because she doesn't want to freak out her sister. So there's a few instances.
But they didn't mention that's the father at all.
Yeah. But you kind of see him in like photos and stuff.
Oh man, I completely missed that.
Oh well, there's a few little bits like that where it's either sometimes it's people who are kind of there to kind of blend in, and sometimes it's just people that are like sort of freaking the person out because they're actually seeing them. I mean, in the instance when I'm kind of going a bit further, but yeah, there are rules to it, and the director himself has kind of said there's certain rules that come into play. He says like a condom wouldn't stop it. It can be same sex and it'll be passed along. If someone like got on a plane and tried to escape it, there's nothing to suggest that it couldn't get on a plane and follow them as well, kind of thing. There's lots of sort of, I don't know, bizarre. It's one of those things where you don't know whether he had all these rules beforehand or when the film was a success and people asked him questions in like press conferences. He was like, "Oh yeah, here's a rule. If he eats after midnight, then well, no, things pop out."
I don't mind that. Yeah, some of those rules are maybe confusing because I didn't kind of think too much about, you know what I mean, like oh well, if that happens for that reason, I kind of just went along with it.
The whole point is that when they become infected, they're permanently infected for life. Yeah. Which is the thing, like where she has to tell, where the next person has to be told after the event. Yeah. They have to be told, which is an interesting premise. It's like, oh, I've had sex with this person, I need to tell them now.
I missed that. Is that definitely a thing? They have to tell them.
Yeah, because put it this way: if they don't, they don't have to tell them. But if they don't tell them, and that person is randomly. They die, then it comes back to that person.
I know, but then like sort of jumping right to the end, I suppose, like when it's passed on, a guy goes and has sex with a prostitute, the idea that it's going to get passed on quickly to multiple, like very quickly from a prostitute to a client, then onto someone else, etc. That's kind of a way of trying to defeat it or putting enough space between you and them. I'm pretty certain he wouldn't have told the prostitute, "Oh, by the way, you're going to get..."
But the thing is, like, I know what you're saying, but obviously we're going into kind of fan fiction now or something, but it's like if you don't tell that prostitute and she or her client is killed, then it just immediately comes back. So the whole point is you have to have sex with someone and then say, look, you need to be aware this is going to happen, you need to pass it on, otherwise I'm going to die. And it's that thing. It's like the curse always comes back. So you have to push. You have to. It's weird. You have to pay it forward. Oh, sorry, I just hit my mic. You have to pay it forward to hope that it doesn't come back, because at some point it probably will come back. If people die before you and it comes back to you, you know, whether it be, yeah.
Wherever you are, it's somewhere walking straight for you. All you can do is pass it along to someone else.
I'm scared. I need to find him.
What did he really do to you?
Apparently he used a fake name to rent a house in the city.
This isn't real, I swear to you, this is just some game. If it kills her, it gets me and goes straight down the line whoever started it. What exactly is supposed to be following you?
I don't know.
Just as a general thing, there are a couple of like really interesting opening scenes. The very opening death scene, all you see is like the girl who was running out the house, like I said, like with her head with her leg bent on a beach, and you don't actually see the death, which was good, because right at the start of the film you're like, oh, what the fuck is going on? But one of my favourite scenes in that first like 20-25 minutes, she wakes up, the guy kind of kidnaps her, and she's in a wheelchair, tied up in this like warehouse, but I really loved the way it was shot. It had this kind of point of view shot looking at her.
The camera was attached to the wheelchair, which was really good when he moved her. So the camera, that was really good. Yeah, throughout this film is visually very strong.
There's a lot of like turning camera shots.
Lots of tracking shots. Yeah.
A lot of tracking shots.
And it's very atmospheric and it looks really nice. And the film is purposely slow, much like the kind of the murderer that it follows, always moving slowly. It's not something that's trying to rush you through it. It's trying to build that atmosphere. Yes, there's the odd like jump scare when like a ball hits a window, or you suddenly like a freaky kid comes through a gap in a door kind of thing. But it doesn't... I don't think it really falls into that like classic horror trope of just doing tons of jump scares for the sake of it.
No, not at all. Like, I was expecting far more jump scares in this film, and if anything, the intended jump scares I don't think were really trying to be jump scares. I don't think, when one of my favourite jump scare film experiences was What Lies Beneath. I saw that at the cinema with my friends. It was one of the craziest films for jump scares, because there's one, like, I swear, every 5 seconds or something. It's crazy.
I've never seen that film. I've always wanted to. It's Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, maybe we should do it, yeah.
That would be a good one.
It's been on my list for a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, we saw that at cinema, and that has so many jump scares that it became almost everyone in the cinema started laughing, because it was we were all enjoying it, but it was too many. There was a group of girls in there, was just like screaming their heads off. But I think this film does rein it in. It could easily have done the whole jump scare thing, but I think that would have gone against the premise, which, as Nige said, is this very slow, methodical killer.
You guys should get in the water. You want to? Maybe in a little bit. Come on. Oh my God! Help me! Jay, what is it?
Like, when they go to the beach, I thought that was a really well structured scene.
Yeah.
Because one of the great things about the movie is that you are often looking, and there are numerous shots where they don't even point out, where you see someone just walking towards them very slowly. You
don't know,
but it's not
it.
No, but but I think on numerous occasions you see that's someone, but the cast haven't spotted it. So I remember there's one point. Oh, that's it. They go into the university to get Hugh's address, because they find out Hugh has been using a pseudonym. So, like, we need to find Hugh, and it's like, oh, he's been using a pseudonym, so he's somewhere else completely. So they're in this, I think it's high school or whatever, and they're sitting in the car park, and the view is looking, it's behind, is it Greg, who's the next door neighbour, or the guy who lives across the street that she sleeps?
The cooler guy, yeah.
Yeah, cooler guy with the long hair, like very 80s looking guy. I don't mean he's in his 80s, he looks like he's from the 1980s, but I think it's Greg, and Jay are sitting in the front seat, so the others are in the back seat. And they talk to him, but in the if you look before they pull out, you see someone in the distance just walking slowly towards it. And I was like, oh, they haven't seen it. And
like a school kid, isn't it? But you don't know. It's
someone just walking, but they don't see it, and you don't, like, you clock it, but they don't see it, and they just drive off into the next scene because it's like, oh, that hasn't. And then, eventually they end up on the beach, and there's like a really. It's obvious what's happening, but the reveal I thought was really well done, where they're on the beach and you see the players, like the cast, on the beach. But in the background behind Jay, she's sitting in like a deck chair, and in the background you see someone approaching.
But they can't. They can't see it, can they?
They can't see.
And,
so
and they don't believe her at this stage either. I think that's the other thing, right? They're not. They're kind of like human.
Well, yeah, because they haven't had the fit. Because this is the thing that leads to it.
Yeah.
So they're having a conversation with her, and she's talking, but there's someone approaching her very slowly.
Isn't it the same girl? I swear it's the girl that's actually in the water at the same time. She's in like the rubber ring.
That's the beautiful reveal, because you see her walking, and it's like, oh, that's the friend, even though you know it's obviously a slow-moving monster. But then they cut to a reverse shot where it's, I think it's Paul sitting on the beach. And as he's talking, you see the other girl with the glasses in the dinghy go past. Or no, sorry, like move into shot. And you're like, okay, well, there's the four characters. So who's this fifth one walking up behind? And that's when she attacks, and they all.
She like pulls. You see her hair just sort
the hair,
up. For the first time, you kind of see the monster without actually seeing the monster. It is kind of invisible to most people.
It's really strange, this scene, because I love the kind of build up into this scene, but I almost didn't want them like to find out that soon in the film. I wanted it to continue that kind of mystery of. I just felt like I feel like all her friends, you know, where it like picks her up and throws her and stuff. I felt like this was this kind of climax. It wasn't needed quite that early in the film. I'm not quite sure where it goes from there, but yeah, I've just really liked that kind of intrigue and the.
I think it would have got a bit tired.
Yeah, but I think tired of like, maybe. Oh, it's our friend. You know, she's clearly, you know, because like you say, Smith. You know, prior to that. They all think she's slightly. They believe her within reason, but how can you believe someone that's clearly having visions? She's clearly having visions. That's what's happening.
Yeah, and PTSD based on what's happened. Like
based on what's happened to her.
Yeah.
But then when I think the hair goes up and they clearly see someone's pulling her hair, and then it's the guy in the friend zone, Paul. I think he rushes up. And he breaks the chair on something.
It's like
the
invisible man type thing.
And then it slaps, and then it takes him out. So you go, oh right. So now at this point we've established that the creature can actually physically interact. Because at this point we don't know. At this point it's like, right, it can physically interact with everyone. It's just that only the person with the curse and the people before who have also had the curse can see it.
What do you see?
And the fact it's on a beach as well is it's really interesting, because I found like a lot of like emphasis on water in this film.
Yeah.
So right at the start of the film, she's floating in I say a pool, but it's like one of those kind of like giant paddling pools.
Giant paddling
for
pools,
adults. But then the beach, like right at the beginning, the beach there, and then obviously the big pool ending. But you get a lot of sense of water in this film. But I didn't quite get what that meant.
I actually, Smith, it's amazing you say that. I'm remembering now when I was watching it, and you see there's, if I remember rightly, you see a scene where the paddling pool is like wrecked and there's no water in it.
Yes,
anymore.
That's right, yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, maybe this is like water is its. What was that film? Mel Gibson.
Signs. We talked about it, didn't we? Briefly.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, maybe. Water is the creature's weakness or something. But then that soon becomes, as we'll find out, evident that it's far from the truth.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, there's a little bit of trivia about it, but it's more just like someone's opinion rather than something specific. Like, obviously, for Jay specifically, she's got a lot of fond memories of being in that little paddling pool. It's like a safe space. But every time we get to a larger sort of mass of water, be it the lake where the first girl at the very start gets sort of snapped, legs sort of snapped in half and mullered, obviously the lake they go to as well when they're trying to escape, everything, and even the swimming pool, like there's more danger in it being there. And there's like references to it, like on the TV, there's a monster that kind of comes out of the water in one of the films that they're watching. Right. There's when she's in the classroom, they're talking about the old man and the sea. So, and then that sort of old lady starts walking across like the sort of school grounds and things like that. So there's a lot of references to it, but there's no specific reason why that was necessarily picked as a major reason. So yeah, I'm in the dark as much as you guys.
Oh, fair enough. No, interesting. I just wanted to say how I thought I felt really good. The lead actress is Maika Monroe. I thought she was brilliant in this.
Oh, she's brilliant throughout
in this film.
She looked really familiar as well.
She does.
Like I think she just looks like other people,
like a girl next door. But I think that's the idea, right? It's but yeah, she's got a good relationship with the kind of geeky like friend who she obviously becomes like the main love interest in the film. But yeah, she's brilliant in the film because obviously for many parts of this film she's playing this terrified teen where all her friends are acting alongside.
What I liked about her performance is she goes from kind of, you see her initially like when she's going on the date with Hugh, she's got all the confidence. And it is amazing, like she does go through a real strong transition where by the end of the film, prior to the finale in the pool, when they're, I think, almost like having a safe sleepover, when her and Paul are talking, you can tell she's utterly just exhausted because she can't sleep, she can't do anything, she's constantly in fear. And I thought that was, I again, performance-wise, it was like really impressive to see her, because obviously I'm guessing, like most films, this was shot out of order to some degree.
You would imagine. I don't
know, with independent films, sometimes they do shoot them in order, but I think
you see that descendants.
That slow, but it's not done overly dramatically and like her sobbing and going. There's one great shot, isn't there, where she's in the hospital bed.
Yes.
After one of the incidents, and it's after the car crash, and then she's in hospital. She wakes up, she turns, and she hears someone outside walking, and it just turns out to be a nurse walking by. And then like a teardrop falls down her eye, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then obviously at that point, that's when, I want to say Greg, again, the neighbour, that's when he sleeps with her because he's like, I'm going to take the curse from you.
And this was really interesting, this scene, because you think, is he doing this because to take the curse, as it were, or is he taking advantage of her?
I thought that was more with the best, like the guy she's known for years, the Paul character.
Oh, interesting, right.
I felt like he was, like, don't get me wrong, I felt that he cared for her, but I felt that he was doing it because he had lusted after her for the longest time. Like
you were my first kiss.
Yeah, like.
But I felt that was more genuine, though. I thought that Greg, the neighbour, was just, he wasn't that bothered.
He just shagged around. Yeah. He was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, but like with the Paul character, they've got that history of like that first kiss. But there's one bit when she's had that experience with Hugh, and she's on the couch, and he's like, oh, you can sleep on the couch with me. And he's sitting there, and he's just giving like, their foot is close or something, and he's giving glances. It's like, oh, he wants her really badly.
Yeah.
So, and don't get me wrong, like I think there is a large part of his. Because obviously he sleeps with her at the end, and obviously I think he is very much like, I'm doing this because I care for you deeply, and
sacrifice.
But at the same time, it's like, no, I think this works in his favour. It's like he's clearly lusted after this girl. You see so many shots of Paul throughout the film where he's just jealously.
It's a bit weird, like, oh, it's in his favour. He gets to have sex. Oh, he's got like a monster following for the rest of his days. I don't know whether it's that heavily in his favour, but I get what you're saying.
No. I mean, as in he gets to sleep with this woman that he's clearly wanted to sleep with for the longest time.
Which probably we've all felt in our adolescent youth, where it's like, I would do anything to be with that girl.
Yeah.
It's really the hospital bed sex scene is really uncomfortable though, because you see her just looking.
Well, it's hospital bed.
I was going to say,
looking
because Etox at the end of the bed, pressing all the buttons and making it go. We're doing that. The bed's moving with our hands for people who can't see us.
People can't
podcast.
Visual medium.
But yeah, as like you say, when with that kind of creepiness. I mean, it's been done so many times in horror films in hospitals. I don't know what it is about them, but actually,
is it? Have you got like a website?
I think so. I feel like it has, because there's something so clinical and what you would associate with getting better and getting well and all the rest of it. And you're at your most vulnerable when you're in hospital. You're hurt and that. So the fact that she's at this stage where this thing can get her, and then obviously Greg has this very clinical, uncomfortable sex with her, and she kind of just is looking to the side and just kind of almost like, okay, whatever, I'm just kind of going with it. And that was almost more uncomfortable than some of the scares. Sorry, you go.
Well, I was going to say, it's quite... A couple of times she ends up in hospital. Like, the first time after, obviously, she's not raped, but taken advantage of. And then again, when she, like, injures her arm. But both times you think, well, she's just been, like, unconscious in hospital. Why is the monster not just come and got her? Like, is the monster afraid of hospitals? Does it not want to come into it? It seems
I don't like people when they're asleep. I need them to be fully conscious.
I think it'd be a bit of a rubbish horror film.
It's a very picky monster.
Yeah, it is a picky monster.
Yeah, it's true. Don't fall asleep. Yeah, it's not quite that. But yeah, I think, this ending scene we've kind of, like alluded to, and it does build to this scene where they're getting to this point in a, like a classic horror film where they're going to kill it. They're going to get it in every sense. And it culminates in this pool ending scene where they've got all these like devices like a toaster and a kettle and stuff. And basically they're going to like try and electrify it. And it kind of goes a bit weird and a bit wrong, this scene. I think basically for me, this is where, for me, it kind of, the film just like loses a little bit.
I couldn't figure out their idea, because they'd shot it numerous times and realised, it actually is invincible. Like, she'd shot it in the head on one occasion, and someone else.
I think they shot it in the throat, but either way, you'd think that would be enough.
Like, it's a monster. It's pretty indestructible. So instead, what's more deadly than a bullet? Electrocution. We're going to electrocute it
in water.
And I swear, didn't like Jason though in one of the Friday 13th films get killed by like electrocution in water? I feel like it's one of those things.
It sounds like a 1980s horror trope to some degree.
It is a bit. I think, and it's always the thing, right? They think that's the way they're going to kill it, and obviously that it's not really dead type thing.
Well, the director actually kind of came out and said afterwards, like they're teenagers, they're idiots. It's like a Scooby-Doo ending. It's like they think this'll work, Shaggy, and they go ahead and do it, and it's just a really crap idea that doesn't work very well. And like, it's a movie plan, really. It's the kind of thing that if you're in this like nightmare scenario, what are you going to do to kind of get out of it? It's like the impossible situation. And so the director came out and said, like, we kind of avoid any kind of traditional setup for that sequence, because it's in the more traditional horror films, might be a clue that would lead them to figure out a way to destroy the monster, because we've seen that in so many films. And like, there's, oh my god, I found the back page of this book that says if you do a little jig, and he said he purposely kind of tried to avoid that kind of little teaser, and instead they just do their best to try and accomplish something off their own heads, and they just do terribly at it. And it's kind of like a non-conventional way of having that third act confrontation, but quite a fun way to do it, because, well, he thought it was fun. It's up to the viewer whether they thought it was fun.
True. It's quite funny when it starts throwing all this stuff in the pool, and then she's in the pool.
It's a very good shot, I must say.
But there's one amazing image, which I like, as in shot, where it's dragging her, and there's this wide shot underneath in the water, and you just see her leg being pulled, and I thought that was really lovely. And then obviously the final image of the blood in the pool was really kind of
he shoots as well cinematic. When he's holding on, and you see like the bullet go through the water as well, which again for like an independent film was really well done.
All really well done in that regard.
And the monster was no more.
They think that, and then
was it?
Then obviously you get the scene at the end, which you need, right, in all of these type of horror films.
No, you don't. I don't think you do. I don't think you need this scene at all.
I disagree. I totally disagree.
Because you can see it coming a mile off. It's like, right, they've defeated the baddie. He's dead. Oh, there he is.
No, but you need that in a horror film, I think. What? Because
you want to turn it into a franchise that never fucking ends?
Well,
I'm guessing they're making a sequel.
Well, probably, but I still think that even if they don't or do, I think like when they did the Final Destination test screenings in the original cut, this is kind of linked. They didn't have that oh, it's back again at the end of the film, and people were like, oh, I hate the ending, didn't walk out. So they actually ended up changing the ending for that very reason, that people want that last scare to go and then into the credits. It's just, I know it's a trope, I know it's done in pretty much every horror film,
every other horror film,
but also you don't actually know if it is
it's ambiguous, isn't it?
Because
you don't know what it's obviously coming after.
Well, no, but it might not be.
You don't know that. You've jumped to that conclusion.
You've made that conclusion, Etok.
Well, then who's it going? Who's it walking after?
Well, it might not be.
Who says that is it? Yeah, it's Dave. It's Dave from down the road having a walk.
No, it's obvious what they did. I guarantee the start of the sequel will be like, and she was killed, and they were killed. On the streets.
I know what will happen. The start of the sequel will be 10 years later, and it will be totally unlinked, which is not a good thing.
Well, the film, just to kind of go back to how successful this film was, it cost $1.3 million to make, and it made $23.3 million. So it did very well for an independent film. And I won't beat around the bush. This year they've announced they are doing a sequel called They Follow, which will have the same lead actress in the film and the same director. So they are kind of going back to the roots of it.
So basically, not what I said.
Filming will begin in 2025, apparently. So we've got a little bit of time before it comes.
Before we do that one.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I will have left the podcast.
Have you got more trivia while you're there?
Come on, Nige.
I've got a little bit of trivia for you. A little bit of trivia. So the whole film's concept derives from a recurring nightmare the director used to have, in which he was stalked by a predator that continually walked slowly towards him. I feel like that's probably a common dream that some people have, like the one where your teeth fall out. But who knows? Quite early in the film, they go on a date in the cinema. It's like a classic ye-old style cinema, which apparently is... Yeah, it's a nice scene. It's the Redford Theatre, a historic Japanese-style theatre with a fully functioning Wurlitzer organ.
Which is the shot of the organ,
Indeed, in the old Redford neighbourhood in Detroit, Michigan. The Evil Dead actually premiered there as well. So there you go. There's a little bit of horror movie history.
Sorry, where's it located, that cinema?
That's Detroit. So.
Wow, that's where the Evil Dead premiered. Nice.
Yeah, so there you go. There's a few different sort of characters that play the monster. One of them is extremely tall, and that was none other than Mike Lanier, who is a 7'7" resident from Detroit, who apparently designs engines for General Motors, and is half of the world's tallest twins. Wow. So there's random trivia for you if you ever want.
He's half of the world's tallest. So there's two of them.
There's another twin who is equally tall.
Oh man, they should have got both.
That was almost like a question.
It's a brain.
A question, a mathematical thing. Like
he's half of a twin. So you mean?
Wait, he's half of the size.
He's 14 foot.
He's a twin, or he's half of a twin.
Carry on,
and if it takes him 4 hours to get to don't make me employ trigonometry to work this answer out.
The director wasn't personally interested in the folklore behind where it comes from. In his perspective, it's just dream logic, in the sense they're all in a nightmare, and when you're in a nightmare, there's no solving it, even if you tried to solve it. So whether or not he walks back on that for the sequel, I guess we will find out. But for some reason as well, there's a ball that seems to follow the curse throughout the film. Apparently he was actually terrified of baseball as a child. No, I've made that up. Basically, there's just a ball that hits a window, lands in a garden. There's no seemingly reason for why that happens. But again, and there's a lot of colour association, like red and pink, for instance, being there quite a lot as well. Last bit of trivia I've got. The final scenes contain several allusions to death and the souls of the dead, or ghosts, as they are commonly known to you and I.
I've heard of those.
In the hospital, Yara, via her weird little shell phone, reads the following line from The Idiot. Your soul will leave your body and will no longer be a person. In the next scene, when Jay and Paul walk down the street, the neighbourhood is decorated with fake cobwebs and pumpkins, indicating it's Halloween time. Obviously, Halloween can be traced back to ancient traditions set to honour the souls of the dead. She's wearing a white dress, he's wearing a long white hoodie, both of them bearing a slight sort of resemblance to ghosts. And there's a dead end sign in front of them to their right.
They're dead. That's the twist.
Then next to them, a man is busy removing dead leaves, and what could be seen on the inscription of Jay's cast reads, "Here lie the bones of Jay." So obviously it's a very symbolic attempt at an ending. So there you go. Speaking of which, symbolic attempt of the ending of the trivia is me saying the end.
Nice.
That was a very
subtle.
Yeah, heavy on the bollock there as well. Yeah.
Why, thank you.
I'm kind of... unsure where I was going to say.
I think we got to go E-Top first because we know
where
what he's
going
to
to say. Because it's only going to go up. Trust me.
So let's hear let's hear why you didn't like this film more.
Well, I despise this movie.
Wow.
I thought I really. So it's got so much going for it, right? It's got beautiful cinematography, great acting, a great premise. And I think I've made this criticism about certain films in the past. I can't remember which ones, but to me, and I don't know, I wonder if it. I haven't heard. Nige would have brought this up in the trivia, I'm sure. To me, this feels like a 10-minute horror short that they said, oh, let's turn this into an hour and 40 minutes. And I don't think this film justifies its length. I understand that you can go, well, the whole point of this film is this slow, methodical pace because that's how death is stalking them. I totally understand that. But I just thought there was so much unnecessary film in this film. It was just, I got so bored throughout. There were scenes when nothing was happening, and I get, again, why that's a draw for some people. It's like, oh, well, not every film has to have, like, traditional tropes of hitting this, that, and this. But there were some moments when, like, and we've said and praised, rightly so, the cinematography, but it's like, I don't need to see a 360-degree whip pan, or not whip pan, but just a pan that's not serving anything apart from, it felt very much, what's the word at times? This film was like up its own arse. It was just
style over substance.
It's filleting itself, kind of thing of like, look what we can do, and it's just, and it's probably, I know that they're not doing that. There's like a middle, like the start of the film, like Smith said, like rightly, so intriguing. You're like, oh my god, what's this? How she ended up here? What's this situation? Then Jay gets, kidnapped by her date, and you're like, what the hell is going? Then he tells her about the curse. You're like, oh my god, this is going to be so interesting. That's like what the first 20 minutes of the film. And then it's that her, like I said in my synopsis, my cynical synopsis, or the cynical part of my synopsis, it's just the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, where it's like, right, and I get that she's being chased, but it's like, we're going to go to this location and try and solve it. Oh no, here it comes again. We're going to go to this location and solve it. Oh no, here it comes again. What shall I do now? Well, let's go here. Let's try this. Let's try that. And it just felt like a series of unfortunate events that was just like, dum, dum, dum. And I really didn't think it worked. And I found myself getting very bored during this movie. It's like, it's not that I want the monsters to be like, I love a good slow monster. We've talked before, like, some of the best zombies, Night of the Living Dead, you don't want them to be like, I'm a zombie. You want it to be like, I'm a very slow.
You definitely don't want it to be like that.
Yeah.
I'm a zombie. I'm a zombie.
Yeah,
I want to see that film.
You don't want it.
You love
you don't want it
film,
like a World War thingy.
World War Z. Oh
Yeah.
god. All climbing up one another. No, I prefer like that the dread, the threat of the methodical monster, the killer, the Michael Myers. That is fantastic. That's what you want. That dread, that feeling of, and this film has fantastic atmosphere and tension throughout. But it's like I say, it's one, it's too long. Two, there needs to be. It's almost like it goes Act 1, Act 3, and there's just like a middle section of just nothingness, really. I wasn't too harsh. I thought the ending was okay, the big pool fight. I was like, I'm down with this, actually. This is quite funny how their Scooby-Doo, like Nige says, Scooby-Doo-esque plan suddenly backfires, and then the spirit is chucking the things into the thing to kill them.
It's like he's gone on to Generation Game and he's just taking things off the conveyor belt.
It's a cuddly toy.
Yeah.
It's a fondue set. Ooh.
That's a great reference.
Yeah, man, trust me, I really wanted to like this film for its, like I say, premise, acting, visuals. The music is fantastic throughout.
It's good, yeah.
But my God, I just don't think it warrants its length. I really didn't enjoy this. I wouldn't recommend this. I never want to see this film again. If we review the sequel, you'll have to get Ben Bishop in because I ain't going to do it. So, for that, I'm giving this a big old 3.
Wow. Okay. That is low.
Breathe.
You can breathe now, E-Top.
Oh yeah, it's higher than Mr. Nobody.
Man, well, there you go.
Just.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I did see that coming, to be fair. Nige?
well, how can I follow that, I suppose? But
you guys can only go up from here. That's the good thing.
Yeah.
You would think.
So I love classic horror films. Well, I say classic horror films. When you say classic horror films, I immediately think like Hammer horror films from way back when, or Nosferatu. I suppose I like sort of 70s and 80s horror films. I love John Carpenter. I love kind of that style of film. I'm a big fan of like the slow-moving monster, be it, like you say, slow-moving zombies, Mike Myers, even The Blob wasn't particularly fast, those kind of films, that kind of trashy horror. And I think I agree with a lot of your sentiments in the sense of the things you called out for praise. Like, I really like the style of this film. I like the fact it doesn't necessarily pick a specific date or time, and it works quite well in doing that. I think all the actors are really strong for an independent film. There's always the chance you're going to get someone who's kind of chewing up the screen or overacting, or just doesn't quite have that sort of not necessarily star power, but just believability, I suppose, in what is, as you said, kind of a bit of a ridiculous premise. I think even the director said when he was working on the film, he didn't really want to tell anyone about the premise because it sounds so ridiculous when you say it out loud. Obviously, from your perspective, Etok, the whole premise, there's elements of it you don't like, even when it's played out in 1 hour and 40 minutes worth of film. So yeah, but for me, yeah, there was a lot of really strong things about this film. I can understand why it was such a kind of like independent darling, did really well.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of film, I really like the intro. The ending for me, not as great, but I kind of, like you said, I get it, the sort of Scooby-Doo ending, the very ending, I like that kind of thing. It's a nice little sign-off for horror films. Whether or not they were going to do a sequel or not, I think was irrelevant. And if anything, I'm a little bit disappointed that they're going to do a sequel, but I get it. I understand why, and I imagine it will be a lot worse than this. So look forward to that, Etok. But yeah, like, I'm not as frustrated by like the slow moving kind of act 2, so to speak. I feel like it kind of gives you as a viewer a little bit of time to kind of almost breathe and think, oh, what are they going to do, like, and have that kind of thought process. Yes, there is dead time, there's definitely dead time, and some of that is filled by maybe creative, inverted commas, shots and like experimentation, which probably the film does suffer by, but I think the premise is good, if not a little bit ridiculous in points. I think the random nudity of some of the like it's is a bit strange, but at the same time it kind of adds to that creepiness, and like how some of them look. One of them seems to be like urinating on themselves.
Yeah, that was
pretty freaky.
Disturbing.
So yeah, there's bits of this that don't work, but there's definitely bits that do. And I think it would have been like a really strong date movie to go with a girl or a boy, if you're that way inclined, at the cinema, hang out, watch this. Probably wouldn't necessarily get lucky afterwards because of this film as well. So that's something else to bear in mind. Like, maybe not tonight, maybe the next day, eh?
You've seen through my chloroform plan.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'm struggling with this because I am torn, it's definitely in like the 6-7 range, and I don't think it's memorable enough to do a half mark. And I'm probably gonna, because it's Halloween, I'm probably gonna fall on a 7 and say, like, I think most people will enjoy watching this film, but it is a slow burner. And if you don't particularly enjoy slow-paced films, if you don't have that nostalgic feel for the likes of Halloween or Friday the 13th, or even those kind of like Japanese, Korean horror films we mentioned earlier, maybe this won't be for you. But if you're someone that enjoys horror films, that you like that slow-burning suspense, that not knowing what's going to happen, although we've kind of told you everything that's happened, this film may well be an enjoyable one for you. So I'm going to fall on 7 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, I picked this. I did want to see it, and I have kind of heard. I had heard quite a lot of people recommend it as this kind of like almost like this niche cult kind of film that has kind of been growing over the last 10 years. And yeah, like before, I never heard of it around the time it came out. I think for me, I always forgive certain aspects of a horror film, just in general. You know, I like a horror film. I like the kind of suspense. I like the kind of a number of things in horror films. And some horror films I watch are really bad, but I kind of watch it because it's a horror film. It's kind of like this weird, like, you know, like genre of film, almost like a Christmas film where you kind of watch it independent and, you know, probably rate it slightly independently of that. So I kind of like agreeing with like especially both of what you said positively about the film. I love the setting of this film. I love the feel of it. I like the fact that it's not trying to be glossy. You know, like many horror films nowadays are quite glossy, even if it's low budget. You know, you can make it all close up and music video-y. And yeah, I kind of take your point on the indulgency of some of the shots. I didn't mind it. I did.
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
But you know, there is sometimes big, long tracking shots that are probably unnecessary. However, I was really intrigued. I was scared, you know, and I was drawn into these characters in this, almost like this family that they set up amongst these teenagers. And, you know, that kind of resonated with me. And I thought it was done well. There's one scene where the weird mum attack kills attacks the neighbor
Greg.
And I thought that was really freaky, and you know, I saw it coming, but I thought it was well done. Weirdly, I agree with Nige. Like the pool scene, it kind of like, for me, it kind of went a bit too far, but at the same time, you know, I kind of get, how do you end this type of film?
Oh, I think you meant Paul the character, not the swimming pool.
Yeah, the swimming pool scene. I didn't. It's on your point of it being slow. It's interesting because I know it is slow, and you know, there are films that we've discussed in this podcast, so I thought, oh, that's unnecessary slow, like Nomadland, for instance, and not much happened.
Oh God, yeah.
However, I didn't mind it. I didn't find it that slow, and I just thought it was for its own ilk. Good. Music as well. I loved the music.
Music was great. So good.
So yeah, I think with all that in mind, I don't think it's quite high enough for, you know, like an 8 or something, but yeah, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Quite, yeah, for a low budget horror film, I personally think it ticks the boxes.
It's amazing that a film costs, how much do you say, Nige? $1 million?
Like $1.3 million, yeah.
In this modern day, to make a film for that money, like I say, like regardless of my issues with it, in terms of cinematography, shooting, like some of the camera work in it, as we've said, is fantastic. Like a lot of the bit when she does the getaway in the car, when she's at the beach house, she gets in the car and it's all shot so from like the point of view of the car, but it's really beautiful.
Very like Sam Raimi vibes from that as well, who obviously did things
show,
like super low budget when they did Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
But
so
$1 million for a film in 2014, that just seems extraordinary.
And for it to get picked up at a festival, I think it got picked up at Cannes, didn't it? And then kind of go on from that, you know. Yeah, it's that's the thing, like, it's amazing.
Regardless of my criticism, I understand why people like it. I understand why it's become a thing. It's just, for me and my rating, like all our ratings, it's our own personal view. It's just like, not my cup of tea. Simple as that.
And that's the great thing with this podcast. And you know, it's even more interesting when we disagree on a film, because you know, sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. But yeah, guys, where do you fall?
And I think our audience would agree that you were always wrong about Mr. Nobody.
Absolutely correct.
I think if you look on IMDb, it's got 8 out of 10. So
Jared Leto's got a lot of bombs.
Yeah, Smith has been generating loads of different accounts, paying money for loads of IMDb accounts.
0.5, yeah. And guys, what do you think of this? Is it your Mr. Nobody, or is it your nobody? I don't know where I'm going with that. Is it?
Where was that?
Is it your following it? Get in touch. Email us on offradiopod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradiopodcast. Let us know what you think about It Follows, and tune in next week for our second instalment of our Halloween double bill, The Crow. Did you know you can now subscribe to Off Radar It's a Movie podcast on YouTube? You can watch exclusive trailers and listen to brand new full episodes. All links and info in the description down below.
Somebody stop me!